Hey everyone, I hope that you guys are doing well. Welcome to another video. Today's video is going to be pretty short, but before we jump into that, I just want to start off by saying thank you to all of you who left just really kind and supportive comments on the last video. It's really appreciated, and I just wanted to quickly let you guys know that. As far as today's video, today we're going to be talking about an experiment that I did. Usually whenever I have a question about photography, I'll do an experiment to see if I can come up with an answer to that question. And the question for me for quite some time is, can I do portraits with a point and shoot that I find aesthetically pleasing? And so today's video is pretty much my first experiment doing that. So back in August of 2021, I met up with Ariel at a hotel somewhere like near a swimming pool. And we decided to do a photo shoot. The entire shoot, pretty much, I did with the Fuji X-E3, and I'm going to be making a video about that photo shoot within the next month or so. But while I was there, as is usually the case, I had the Fuji X-F10 in my pocket. There's a certain look that I've wanted to achieve. It's portraits with an on-camera flash. And, it usually, whenever I see that style of photography, usually it's shot on film. And I find that this style lends itself really well to like indoor type of shots, indoor photography. That wasn't the case for the shoot. We were outdoors, but I figured I would give it a go anyways, and I would just experiment a little bit. So I'm just sharing with you the results that I was able to get on that day and the things that I learned on this first attempt. Just a quick little parentheses that I'd like to share with you. Even if you do not have an X-F10, but you have a 28mm lens that you put on, even if it's a big DSLR camera, or if you have a point and shoot, even if it has a 35mm lens on it or a 24mm lens on it, I think that the things that I was able to figure out on this day could be very valuable or very useful to you, even if you don't have an X-F10. The first thing that I want to talk about that I felt contributed to this look was the flash. Now, if you guys have seen my previous video where I talk about my X-F10 settings, my flash is usually set to flash compensation -1. And I decided to stick with that in order to get a nice balance between the on-camera flash and the ambient light. I find that there's an optimal distance where the flash will work the best. Coincidentally, that same distance that works really well for the flash seems to work really well for the lens on this camera, which is an 18.5mm lens. It's a crop sensor, so in full frame equivalent terms, it's a 28mm full frame equivalent lens. I find that shooting at 3/4 distance worked the best for the flash as well as for composition and for the look that I was going for. In fact, I would say that pretty much the majority of the images that I was able to make within that 10 to 15 minute span of time with this camera, the ones that I liked, they were all pretty much three-quarters composition. And like I said, this worked really well for the flash. It worked really well for this lens. There are a couple of shots where I got a little closer. Obviously, was not really going for a headshot look because with a 28mm focal length or a wider angle lens, it's going to lack the compression of a portrait lens, like let's say a 75mm or 100mm lens. So it's a different look, but it's exactly the look that I was going for. The next thing that I want to share with you is composition. With a lens like this, like the 28mm lens, I found that placing Ariel or placing my subject in the middle of the frame works best. Usually whenever I compose, I don't always compose in the middle. Usually I'll compose slightly to the left, slightly to the right. But for this particular use or this particular look, I felt that composing with the subject in the middle worked best, mainly because oftentimes with point and shoot cameras or with wide angle lenses, the edges tend to distort a little bit. Maintaining a 3/4 distance and a center composition felt the most natural to me. I felt like I got something a little bit more natural. That being said, however, probably some of my favorite shots that I got doing this experiment were actually closer than 3/4, and I really love those images. The next thing that I want to talk about is the actual look, the aesthetic of these images. I wanted to go for that like film-like point and shoot vibe, and I shot pretty much everything with the on-camera flash except for these two images that you're seeing on the screen now. I couldn't help it. I feel like this, I wanted to compare like what would be the difference between like open shade, what kind of colors and what kind of look would I get with open shade, versus open shade with the on-camera flash. I think that for open shade, using an on-camera flash isn't really necessary. I was pleased by the color rendition of this particular camera. All of the images in today's episode, they're all JPEGs. At the time, I was using my Astia JPEG workflow. If you guys have not seen that video on that workflow, I'll leave a link either in the description or up here somewhere. Feel free to check that out. And so anyway, so I used that workflow. I pretty much shot everything in Astia the way that it comes out of camera with shadows -1, and then I added some contrast afterwards. There are some images, like the black and white images, for example, that I added a black and white preset, but the images were shot in Astia, and then I just converted them to black and white using a preset that I've created for my JPEG workflow. In fact, I think most of the time now, I have certain presets that I've created for my JPEGs, and I rarely, if ever, at least in the last year, will edit the raw files these days. For the most part, I'm always editing the JPEGs. And so the images that you have been seeing in today's episode were pretty much straight out of camera JPEGs. There were a couple where I did add a little bit of like color contrast using the curves panel. And that was it, guys. I do want to talk about f-stops. I was going for that point and shoot look, but I still kind of wanted to separate aerial from the background. And so I used the autofocus on this camera for most of the shots, except for one. And I'll talk about that one shot in a little bit and why that shot is important and how that shot kind of pushed me or challenged me to change my approach. So all of the images that you're seeing today were shot at 2.8. That's as wide as this lens will go. Looking at these images, even if it's almost imperceptible, I do think that there's like a tiny bit of blur that does separate aerial from whether it be the water or whether it be from the background. That being said, there was one photograph where I set the camera to manual focus, and I pretty much zone focused. I think I was at like 5 meters, and then I set it to f8. And then I used the on-camera flash because I wanted everything to be sharp. I wanted the water to have texture, and I felt that using the on-camera flash as well as setting it to f8 and zone focusing, I would be able to like capture a crisp image all around. I like the look of this image. In fact, since then, I have been experimenting with doing street photography. Like my street photography now, I used to shoot everything at 2.8. Lately, I've been shooting street photography at f8 or 5.6. And that is an exercise that I'm currently working on. And I'm going to be making a video about that very, very soon. So these are the things that I learned on my first attempt, going for this like point and shoot film vibe that I've been curious about, trying to achieve. And I thought that I would share them with you. It's a very simple video. Hopefully you guys found value in it. If you guys have a point and shoot that you guys, like to use for portraits, let me know. Leave it in the comments below. Maybe leave your Instagram account. I would love to see them. And yeah, probably within the next month or 2 months, I will make a video where I share with you some more results of different portraits that I've made using this little amazing little point and shoot. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Take care. All right. Bye.